Hello everyone and welcome to episode 82 of Competitive Magic with the Karnies. I'm your host from Italy, Andrea Mengucci, and joining me as always we have Javier Dominguez from Spain.
Hello everyone.
And Anthony Lee from Australia.
Hola.
And today we are also joined by our, regular special guest on the podcast, ProTour champion Simon Nielsen.
Woo! Hello, thanks for having me.
Welcome, Simon. Showing us the cool-looking trophy. If you're watching on YouTube, we are all here cherishing Simon great success winning ProTour Amsterdam with Nadu. So congratulations to you, Simon. I had the pleasure of commentating you live in Amsterdam. And I don't know if Anthony and Javier know about this, but you're actually supposed to be doing the commentary on Sunday.
I was supposed to do
it
in Chicago, and then I made the finals, so I couldn't do it. And then I was supposed to do the live commentary in Amsterdam as well. And people were like, "Why did they keep hiring you, Simon? It's a bad idea."
What happened on Sunday? Well,
Simon? I was busy because I had made the top 8, and I thought I was going to be able to do it because Javier was going to crush me in the quarterfinals, and then I could go and do the top 4 with you guys. But then that didn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, we gotta congratulate Javier Dominguez as well for another amazing performance coming to a top 8 with Jeskai control. And overall, great performance by you guys. It's going to be a beautiful Worlds where there's 4 people rushing for that Kai Buddha Player of the Year trophy. And I guess a lot more than 4, probably 6 or 7 are still in the race. So it's going to be a great day.
Well, it looks like last year's, right? Also was like,
yeah.
Last year I think there was 5. And it was Simon and I also battling there. This year's I think it's 6, but it's pretty much going to be the same where if some of these players stop at the walls, probably.
I think last year the leading player had less of a lead than this time, but I actually haven't checked. I'm ahead by like 11 points, but I'm not quite sure how much that actually matters because if I don't make top 8 and someone else makes top 8, they'll probably overtake me. It would be my guess.
So there's as I said, you two, Simon and Javier. There's also Jason Yee and Seth Manfield. I think are all at the top 4.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure there's other people below it.
Yeah, I mean, but Simon will top it. So someone will top it. So you know, it's it's kind of given at this point.
No.
So okay, Worlds. Worlds is gonna be standard with 2 new sets, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, that's so long from now. Then
holidays.
Yeah. Simon, have you done some holiday or you plan to do some holiday after this great win?
Yeah, so after getting home from the Amsterdam, I spent like 2 days in Amsterdam. I went on a music festival for 1 day, and then I've been sick for a week. So that's my holiday. I've just been in bed and I've been watching coverage. But the secret is that that's what I would have been doing anyway, so it doesn't actually change anything.
In your vacation. Watching coverage. No, the coverage. I watched one match of the Pro Tour. It was actually the one between you two. Extra coverage. It was between you two in the top 8, where Javier started crashing you quickly in 2-0, and then you came back.
Yeah,
that was definitely one match.
Yeah, that was not our most focused performance. That's for sure.
Yeah, a testing house match.
Yes. Testing house
could have been more.
No, but it was literally
focused.
like Javier gave me the handshake. I stood up, and then I saw the cameras, and I was like, "Oh right, this was the quarterfinals."
It was very chilly, actually. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's always hard, right, to battle against a teammate of yours. Sometimes it happens that you're so chill and then you just, don't play your best because you're just, so chill. Whereas when you're more focused, playing against an unknown player that you've never seen in your life, maybe you're a little bit more focused. And maybe that's something that I also struggle with. So I'm sure that very common. All right, Simon, any tell me now. We haven't prepared this question, so what's the best story that you have for us here on the podcast about your Pro Tour win? All right, I guess I should have asked this before. So
No, this is way more fun. Putting him on the
That would
spot.
have been smart.
put you on the spot there, Simon. The best story to tell to us and all the listeners about your Pro Tour win. Also, were you wearing this shirt?
No,
at
so
the-
I mean
at the
that's like
topics?
kind of part of it.
'Cause I didn't
think
see it.
honestly, like the best story, like kind of like came when the tournament was essentially over. That is after Sam Pardee gives me like first of all, Sam like just such a gracious opponent. He like I start going off and he's like, "So do you want to do it or do you just want to get it?" And I was like, I think I just want to have the victory. And then he extends the hand. I shake his hand, and then I, jump up and pop off, and I just like start screaming and running towards the audience. And I remember like looking at that audience, and I'm like, I don't recognize any face here. And like as I'm, at this point, I'm wide open, like just going like, yeah, and I'm like about to like high five everyone. That's what I was doing in my mind. But it's just a bunch of strangers, and I don't know what's going on. I'm like, where are my teammates? Like, are they not here? Are they team drafting? What's going on? And then I turn around, and turns out that my teammates were like on their way onto the stage, and I just like ran past them without noticing any of them. And so, yeah, you get this moment where I then turn around and get like, embraces and hugs, and it's all very nice. And then our sponsor, Ultimate Guard, had like, some people over, and one of those people is Henning from Germany, who like all of the Ultimate Guard people were wearing these like super nice floral shirts. And Henning just takes off his shirt. He has like a t-shirt underneath and says, "Hey Simon, do you want this?" And then I just grab it from him and put it on. And that's how it ended up in the trophy shot.
It's very Simon.
Yeah,
Like it's very, very Simon.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think like another like big part of it that is like pretty easy to forget is that I think Jesse Hampton kind of like earned me this Pro Tour situation. At least the top 8 part of it, because I'm in the draft pod on day 2, and I start like drafting some blue and white cards, and there's not that many blue and white cards in the packs, and I end up picking a lot of lands, and I look at my pack like between like pack 1 and 2, and it's just like it seems like a mess, like I'm going to go down a train wreck, and blue white, and then I hear like Jesse in my head being like, blue white is not a good archetype, blue white is not a good archetype, and I'm like, okay, you know what, Jesse, you're right. And then I open my next pack. I open a pack what's it called, the Annihilation, Path of Annihilation, and I'm like, this is not a blue and white card, it's just a green card. I will just grab this and go into green Eldrazi, and then I just like get handsomely rewarded, get past 2 Chrysalises, another Path of Annihilation. My deck is like pretty good for switching in pack 2, and it's like, yeah, the power of like having teammates that can like teach me how to be better. It's like so important.
So you basically skipped the pack,
story, yeah,
and you still
Mulligan the pack.
I was blue green Eldrazi, so I played like the 2 blue cards I had and then splashed some white removal. But yeah, basically.
Eesh.
Yes, switching in draft is not something that many people do, and something that maybe you could you definitely need someone to tell you to. So having teammates that, like you said, Jesse Hampton, definitely a player you see a lot in the single elimination draft queues on Magic Online. Pretty sure anytime I will open Magic Online to see if anyone was in the 8-man queues, there was him. And only him, so I wouldn't join. I would just do something else. That's definitely a very important teammate there. We have Sean Goddard, who does the same. He's like always drafting and always telling us how to draft and how to be better at draft. So yeah, definitely the power of teammates there. Team Handshake putting 3 people in the top 8. Also, Elika sees with Nadu. My question to you guys, and I'm sure what the listeners want to know, is how did you come up with splitting in your team? So as always, important teams, it's pretty rare that they all come up with the same deck unless it's pretty obvious. But this time, I guess it wasn't, since you and Ilikasis went on Bant Nadu, Javier and Anthony went on Jeskai Control. Did anyone else play anything else from your team?
No, that was the split. We had 4 Jeskai players and 9 Nadu players, 13 in total. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think maybe Javier should speak to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the big difference here probably was I will say, the natural reaction to having such a broken deck. Like, I think we all agreed this was a one deck format where Nadu was the only tier 1 or whatever. Like, I think that was something that was kind of clear, but my reaction when this happens is try to build a deck that actually beats that deck for real, which is often not possible. I think it was this time. And that's the big difference, right? Like, in terms of like how to approach this kind of formats. Because, well, one thing I have to say though is this approach is only valid if you have a safety net, which is like a great team that's able to do the Nadu deck anyway, right? That's why I could afford to be like, all right, I'm gonna try to beat Nadu because I think it's possible, and if I don't get there, I can just jump into Nadu because you guys already built this deck very well. And there's like the 10th, 11th, and 12th player working in a deck doesn't really add much, especially when the player is already that good building a deck. That was our impression, I think. I think Anthony can actually probably give a bit of insight in that matter, but mostly we work in the direction of trying to have a good deck against Nadu. The decks were only just built and then played against Nadu. And we only played against other archetypes once we felt that it was like a better than 50% against Nadu, which was not easy. I can tell you that. Like, I'm talking even like full main deck hate decks still will fail to beat Nadu. Like, even decks like, and I remember playing Boros with Mentors and Eidolon's main deck, and it was not enough. Like Nadu was like extremely hard to beat. And eventually, like, only some Necro builds, like some very specific Necro builds, and Jeskai were, in my opinion, the only ones that were like able to have over 50% against Nadu, and that was mostly how, like, some part of the team ended being Jeskai. I will say it was a little bit of a geographical situation where only the players that actually played a lot against Jeskai will consider playing Jeskai, because I will also have not jump out of Nadu unless I got my fair share of slaps against the deck, right? So also it was a bit late. I think if we had more time, more people will have played Jeskai, or 2, no one actually will have played Jeskai, because we'll have concluded maybe Nadu's power was like too much. Like, I think we had the right amount of time, so some of us will decide to play Jeskai, but didn't have enough time to to switch back or just to convince more people. But I will say that's how I left it. I don't know what Anthony has to say about that, because he was also there in the process.
Yeah, that sounds mostly accurate. Like, it was a question of allocating resources in terms of players to begin with, and it's not like So we got to Jeskai in a pretty circuitous way, I think, and I don't really know how people imagine that things go in testing houses, but it wasn't so much just trying to throw things at the wall and see what sticks, but there was quite a way until we got to Jeskai, and a lot of it involved trying to figure out what sorts of decks might be good against Nadu, which led us to mostly reactive decks, because decks that just goldfished weren't good. So we focused a lot on interactive decks, which is something that I think that we're a little better at doing a lot of the time, which also makes sense when we're allocating player resources this way. We spent some effort on playing on tuning and building a Necro list, which I thought had a lot of potential, and for a little while that was our front runner. But I think after that we decided to look more into various decks with Flage, because that card turned out to be very underrated. Like, we thought it was good, but it was better than good. And so the pairing of Interaction and Flage was very natural, and from there we just had to figure out how to make that work, which is how Javier got to his particular build of Jeskai Control, which I think is pretty substantially different to most Jeskai Control decks that you see. It actually plays differently, and that was something that that was a challenge, right? Because it's very difficult to divest how the stock Jeskai control decks look and feel compared to this one. And that's something that we've experienced before, right? Guys like, for example, when Javier had like a different Tron deck and it was supposed to play differently, we had to learn to let go of our preconceptions about Tron. And the same thing kind of applied to Jeskai here. So it was like Javier said, like if we had more time, either we might have figured out more about it. We don't actually know how that would have gone. But yeah, it was definitely super interesting getting here. It's definitely not something I would have expected. I don't think any of us thought that we were going to play a control deck, let alone in Modern, let alone after Modern Horizons 3 with lots of powerful new proactive strategies. But somehow it worked out. The way that I framed it at some point was that the way the pure power level of Modern Horizons 3 had made the field a little more predictable in a way that made it possible for us to play a control deck, which is a little counterintuitive, but I think that's how we ended up getting here anyway.
Yeah, so you mentioned briefly Necro dominance, and that was the other winner, I guess, of the new cards of MH3 from this ProTour, from this top 8. Was that a deck you guys considered? Because in my testing, I was on Necro for the longest of the time, and then just kind of like last day when my teammates started to play the card Vexing Bubble in the sideboard of Nadu, that's kind of what made me switch away. And as you mentioned, having teammates that play a lot of an archetype, so we had a lot of people working on Nadu, I was pretty confident in just net decking them, playing their list, and then learning it in few days. So I want to know your testing process of Necro, if you had a deck that's similar to the Channel Fireball team, if it's similar to Noama, or if it's something much different, because these lists are very different.
Oh, well, first of all, I want to say Vexing Bauble and Nadu doesn't sound that good. If you look at Simon's list, he doesn't even have Vexing Bauble in his winning list, so obviously it's not very good.
Results. We believe in results.
What happened about that? Yeah, story time. So we all like post our list. I decided we break up in like small subsections with like a couple cards different. I'm playing the same list as Julian Henry and Johnny Gutman. And so like I'm just like handshake reacting to like their pictures is like, yes, this is what I'm playing. And then I go and like build a deck on Magic Online, copy it, submit it, and then I go to lunch or whatever and like do things. And then at like 9 p.m. that day on Wednesday, like we submitted at noon, right? At 9 p.m., I go and check the Discord again. I see that Carl has commented, yes, another one playing the sideboarded Endurance. Like he's the only one who has decided to do that. And I'm like, no, I didn't want to play a sideboard Endurance. What's going on? And I check my list, and yeah, sure enough, I registered a second Endurance in my sideboard. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? What did I forget? And so I have to like go through my deck list and try and figure out like what am I missing. And it turns out that there's the Vexing Bauble that literally all my teammates are playing. We're playing it because we think it's incredibly important against Jeskai control and against Necro dominance. It's like super nice as a card you can get off of Ursa Saga. Vexing Bauble, definitely a card you should play in your Nadu deck. And I forgot to register it. So I just have to, like, that was honestly like why I was feeling like really bad about my chances against Javier, is because I don't even have like one of the most important sideboard cards.
You play against Necro dominance at all?
Yeah, I played against Seth in round 4 actually, but I beat him 2-0, and so it was easy.
Nice. Yeah, because I felt like in Mono Black, not the only way, but the best way to beat Nadu was Force of Despair.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just had with Vexing Bauble, I was kind of cold to it. So
yeah, I think I beat Force of Despair by just like not playing my Nadu and making constructs instead. And using Shadow Spear. That was, at least I had that one, and that was important for breaking through Bowmaster tokens and
I wanted to ask you about that one, because Shadow Spear isn't I haven't seen it, and I still don't see it in the people that are playing Nadu now.
No, they just don't understand.
What's about?
So basically, one of actually the decks that we were trying to beat Nadu with was Burn, and I'm kind of surprised that no one came to that conclusion, because it was pretty successful. With like the 4 Eidolons main deck, then we had 2 Ghostfire Slice in the main deck, which is like a 1-mana answer to Nadu, and it can also just go face. And then the sideboard, we had the like 3rd and 4th Ghostfire Slice, and we had 4 Harsh Mentor. And like that deck was like actually good against Nadu. And we
Yeah,
found that like one of the best ways to beat that was a lot of times like you would just not rely as much on the combo. You would just try and like delay them, use your Saga to like get Shadow Spear, and then you could lock them out of the game with Shadow Spear. And just like play the regular Saga plan. And also in general against harsh mentor decks like red white energy, we found that having access to the Shadow Spear of your Saga actually came up enough that it wouldn't quite like beat the harsh mentor in that it wouldn't stop it. You still couldn't go off through it, but it would kind of like give you enough of a life cushion, and like you would equip it to Nado, have this like 4/5 lifelink flyer, and like you could beat their whatever their board was through that. And then also we realized that was like, when we were discussing if it's worth including Shadow Spear for that. At the very last day, we discovered that, wait a minute, against Necro Dominance, a lot of times what happens is that they get rid of our Nadus with some sort of like Necromantia effect, or they just have enough interaction that we can't combo. So we have to rely a lot on Saga, and it doesn't always work because they can trump block with the Bowmasters. They have Shield Red. It's like going to be hard to raise a Shield Red. You can do it with like Bristly Pill and Sagas, but but if you have Shadow Spear, all of these problems become non-problems. And it has another ability where you can remove indestructible and hexproof from things, and so it enables you to besage with a One Ring.
Wow.
And we also figured out to bought in Vidalia and Stormdrake and Teferi in the matchup. Teferi is obviously good. Stormdrake was like still shielded. And these two cards seem like they should work together because you can use Teferi to bounce your Stormdrake back to hand. You can't do that, of course, because Stormdrake has hexproof. Except if you also combine it with the Shadow Spear, you can actually do this. And so we found that like the card actually just like had like so many merits against the Necro deck that it was worth having, and then it also would be a nice cyber card against Burn or Red White sometimes.
Nice, yeah. I actually got paired against the only Burn deck in the room in the 2-4 bracket. It was Hall of Famer Camille Cornelison, and I lost to Land Archmentor, Land Magus of the Moon.
Nice.
Just clean 0 burn spell fire to me. I just couldn't play Magic.
Classic Camille is playing red decks.
Boros Prison, yeah. Yeah, anyway, so those is that's cool story about Shadow Spear, definitely. I want to go back to the mono black thing. Did you guys decided it wasn't good enough? Did you decided that Nadu was just a better deck?
Not exactly.
I mean, clearly, yes.
That was not the process. We knew Nadu was better. The issue was not like the question was never like we knew there will not be a deck that's better than Nadu. Like that's we wanted to have a deck that was good against Nadu, like over 50%, and not embarrassing against the rest. So Mono Black has had some issues. Maybe Anthony remembers some additional ones, but for me, one of them was like obviously the sideboard is kind of a stinker. Like the sideboard is not great. This is not a very good sideboard deck for multiple reasons, mostly because black cards are not particularly good. But the biggest reason I found to dismiss Mono Black was Flage. Like Flage was actually single-handedly often just beating black. Like Necro Dominance is a very good card, but the fact that your deck is both vulnerable to like cards like Teferi or whatever, and like if you draw Necronomicons, you're supposed to win the game, but sometimes the life total is taxed. And Flage, like we will see Flage often beating this deck out of Boros, also Jeskai, like, and also overall anything that attacks life total. Like if Burn was good because of Nadu was good, I would also be good against Mono Black. Like I found the life total attack angle too bad for black, which I mean it's not like it was the only reason, but the deck was already like only marginally good against Nadu from my perspective. So it will need to be good against the rest. And once we played against Boros with Bolt and this guy with Flage, it was clear that this deck was not that good against the rest part of the field, even though it was fine against Nadu.
Yeah, I think the Necro deck just has a lot of very severe structural issues. Like I think the stock Necro decks are honestly just not very good decks. Like the interaction is not that good. It's not like particularly broad. It doesn't use the card Grief very well because it doesn't really have enough pressure. The mana actually isn't particularly great. Like I found like cards like Phyrexian Power is sometimes super explosive, but also often like they can just be straight up game losing, right? Like you have a triple black card in your deck, and sometimes you don't draw your Orcish Bowmaster. Like, there were a lot of issues with the Necro deck that made us feel like it really had to do that specific job to justify. Like, it wasn't a deck that we would just play on its own merit. Like, it had to be actually good against Nadu, and for there to be enough Nadu for that to be worth playing despite whatever other drawbacks it had. And it turned out that those other drawbacks were, in our view, just too much. I definitely like Seth's build a little better. Like, for example, something that we developed very quickly was playing all of the Boggart Trawlers because of that Flage issue. But I don't know, I think the Flage decks can still play around this like reasonably well. And you just have a lot of draws that don't really work very well together as Necro. Like, you have this like combination of trying to put pressure on people, but also playing a ton of card drawing spells. Like, sometimes you see lists with Profane Tutor on top of Necro Dominance and the One Ring. That's a lot of card drawing. But then you have like all this card drawing that draws you a bunch of Thought Seizers and small creatures and the restricted interaction, which is something similar to why I felt the previous 4-color deck with One Ring wasn't very good. I don't know. It just didn't feel like it was very good at doing anything. They never pressured well. It didn't play a great control game unless the removal spells were good, in which case the deck was amazing. But I think it's very hard for that to be the case in Modern, usually. What were you saying?
Were you guys playing with the One Ring or just Necrodominance?
Just Necrodominance. The One Ring, that was just... Go on.
Well, we just got we started actually with One Ring and Necrodominance, but at some point we felt like it was too much of the same effect, because drawing one and two others was actually clunky, and they don't play very well together because you often play a lot with life totals, and so we eventually just got the One Rings from the deck. But we started with both. It's not like
we did start with both, but also like in general, like Javier identified pretty quickly that the One Ring just isn't very good in Modern like right now. Like, the decks are just too fast. Like, the One Ring is fundamentally a card about, playing longer games and drawing a lot of cards. Like, if I'm drawing a lot of cards over multiple turns, I want the game to go long. The game doesn't go long. People are like comboing and killing you on turn 3 or turn 4. Like, the form is actually a bit too fast for the One Ring.
I mean, I said the One Ring is not good in Modern, and then proceed to build a deck builder on the One Ring the day after.
Yeah. But we had to figure out why the One Ring wasn't good in Modern, and then Javier tried to fix that problem. Like, we got to the stage, the One Ring is not good, but and the ways that it was being used were not good, but then Javier tried to figure out a different way that might fix that problem. But it was actually a card that he had to like specifically work to try to fix. Like, it wasn't that by default the One Ring was good, because it was very much the opposite. It was a bad card that he had to build around, I guess. That might be putting it a little strongly, but I feel that's it kind of gets to the sentiment of what we're trying to figure out during the process.
Yeah, the deck I was testing the most was with Marcio and Willie, and it was just like, again, talking about mono black, and at the end, Willie and Marcio ended up playing it and had a decent result with the deck. So that's why I was very interested, because this was the deck I was, I guess, that I liked the most out of the testing, and then kind of chickened out with the Nadu matchup. But maybe everyone's talking about this Nadu ban coming soon, so we may be interested in that. By the way, this Saturday, there's the Content Creator Showdown, and they actually banned Nadu in that tournament. Just kind of wild to think that a Magic Online tournament, runs with a different ban list. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how that tournament goes. I'll be playing on Saturday, and I want to play Blue-Black Psychic Frog Murktide Regent, mostly for content, but also because I also think it's a solid deck. Only one person played it, and it went 7-3. Yuta Takahashi, of course. But I don't know. What do you guys have you played any Psychic Frog deck? Any fair Murktide Regent decks in your testing?
I do. I have played a lot of Psychic Frog deck. I think it's one of the best cards in Modern Horizons, but ultimately none of the decks were actually that good. I have to say the Frog was very good with One Ring.
Exactly.
Sometimes
I wanted
with
to
One
ask
Ring,
if you tried.
I did.
Yeah.
I did try Psychic Frog was One Ring control. That's actually probably the first version of the deck that ultimately ended up being the Jeskai deck, in a way. But to put it simple, Psychic Frog is one of the best cards in Modern Horizons 3, but Flage is a card that's considerably stronger than Udo, and therefore it's also considerably stronger than Frog. That's probably the easiest way I can put it. Yeah. So the biggest issue with Frog is it's not Flage, honestly.
Yeah, this deck has a lot of problem against Flage. I've noticed that.
It's not only this deck. It's just like this Fletch is that strong. I don't know. Like if you go through decks that are not Nadu, there's like, well, they often struggle literally against Fletch, or just struggle on the inevitability that comes with Fletch also. So it's just like even reactive decks have struggled with Fletch because it's pretty much unkillable.
Oh.
It just does so much.
Also, your deck in particular was a great Fledge deck because you had dress down. Like in the PTQ on Sunday, I played your deck. I beat Mono Black who had Surgical Extraction in hand, and then I beat Blue Black Frog who had New Spellbomb in play by going dress down Fledge. So this is something that, better than Boros Energy. It's a better Fledge deck than Boros Energy.
Yeah, Boros Energy, the issue, like Fletch was goodish in Boros Energy, but it was definitely like out of place. Like it's barely playable there. But even though it was not good, when you play like a mirror match or something, Fletch was like, wow, this is so good by itself, even without support. So once you put dress downs and the such, all these decks, like I imagine a deck like this can be very good, the Frog deck obviously, but I would be surprised if it can go toe to toe with like a same kind of deck that actually plays Fletch. I understand Deep Analysis is a good card in this kind of matchups or whatever, but the fact that most removals actually deal with the creatures very well, man, right now like removals are good in Modern. Like I mean, we have like a lot of different removals, like Discharge, Prismatic Ending. All those removals are actually quite good, which is the opposite that we had like on Modern Answers 2. Well, remember when Murted Region was almost unkillable, then the Printed Leaden Binding, which was like the only good removal, but also expensive and also vulnerable to things. Now removals are very good. We have like, all these interactive spells are great, and even cards like Subtlety are sort of power crept a bit. And I think that puts a bit of like, a floor on how good a card like Frog can be. Even though I love Frog, I think also the gameplay is fun. But I will be, skeptical to call it like one of the best threats in the format or something so far. We'll see, though. It's good at Legacy. I can tell you that.
What about you, Simon? What other decks have you tried outside of Nadu?
Yeah, we were definitely like trying to like. I was like also on the part of the team that was like trying to beat it in some ways. And so I mentioned the burn deck earlier. That was something we tried to work on. We also had like red black burn. But like those didn't survive very long, especially playing against Fledge. So it's tough. And I was also on the Storm team for a while. Like that was like, especially like early on in the testing, that was like what I spent a lot of time developing. We also had this like Alex Friedrichsen came up with this this Samwise Gamgee deck with like you have the Cauldron Familiar and then you have Sack Outlets, and that's a 3-card combo. But it works really well with Birthing Ritual because it's like the entire combo costs 1 or 2 mana. And so the birthing, so you don't need to put any 3+ drops in your deck. You just all 1 and 2 drops. So the birthing ritual always hits something you can cast, or like get into play. And that deck seemed like pretty interesting and strong, but like it was like a bit too late in testing for us to justify it. And we also could literally not win a game against Storm, and so we decided to drop that. But I think it's like, I think that was like another relatively interesting avenue to go down. I also worked a lot on the Crabvine decks earlier, especially when we thought that the flares were like incredible in the format. And so we had we had a version with like 4 Flare of Denial and 4 Flare of Malice main deck, plus Buried Alives, and the difficulty was trying to make sure that all of this fit into the same shell that was still proactive enough. And honestly, the deck just ended up being a bit too slow to at least a bit too inconsistent to have the pressure up. Whenever it did its thing, and you would be able to like provide pressure and then have a 0 mana answer and then draw into another 0 mana answer, and yeah, it could be a very scary deck. But actually, I thought I remember having a team meeting where I expressed right before the testing house, where I expressed that the reason I hadn't worked on it recently, the Crabvine deck, was because I thought we were kind of like done with the pre-work, and then we would just pick it up in the house. And then everyone else was like, no, Simon, we stopped working on it because it's bad. You should stop working on it. And I remember I felt a little bit heartbroken. I had to readjust because I honestly thought that would be my front runner to play at the PT.
What about Boros Energy? Have you guys done any testing with that deck?
Did a bit of work with that one. That was like an interesting one where we saw the list and we thought, wow, this seems so bad, it can never beat Nadu. And then we try to, like, the more we play with the deck, I think the more respect we gain for it. The respect for, like, how powerful a Johnny is. The backside just, like, kills people, and how much play you actually have with the deck was definitely interesting to us. And I remember having a session where I ended up actually, like, beating Nadu in, like, 10 games, so I went 6-4 from the Boros side. And that was, like, one where we were like, okay, so we should not underestimate this deck. I mean, obviously, Nadu is still favored in the matchup, but, like, it's probably we expect the Boros to be very popular for that reason. Like, once we figured out that, okay, this deck is actually good and can hang with Nadu, and obviously he's going to line up well against other decks in the format, was at least the idea. Like, it's just an inherently strong deck, and it's going to be easy to pick up. It crushed one of the Japanese tournaments. So we were quite ready for this matchup. We had the Burns and Forge Tender, we had the Shadow Spears I mentioned earlier, and then the two Sun Cleansers. Yeah, that was a big find.
This was a big surprise
for us. Did your team find Sun Cleanser?
Sorry?
Did your team find Sun Cleanser, Andrea?
Did my team have Sun Cleanser? We didn't have Sun Cleanser, but they definitely talked about it. I remember what they said is something that I think makes sense because you had two, right? Because some people were playing one copy, but this is not really a card that you cord for. It's kind of a card that you cast on turn 2 or whatever. Like, it's a card that you want to draw. So it's not like a one-offs, like, let's say, Dranith Magistrate or Soulless Jailer. So you either play a lot of these or you don't play any. And again, Boros Energy matchup felt very good. So we were, not expecting too many Boros Energy. Although, to be honest, a Boros Energy did well. One Boros Energy deck did well, and I think it's still, like, the best way to build it, which is the one with Blood Moon.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a card that we were, like, concluded that was a really good tool of the energy decks against Nadu. It's something we were quite scared of.
Yeah, that's actually how my whole weekend of Magic went, because in the PT, I lost 3 times to Blood Moon out of the 4 rounds, and then at the PTQ, I lost to Benton to his Blood Moon when I was playing Jeskai Control, which, Javier, your deck doesn't deal with Blood Moon very well. I have noticed.
Yeah,
and
so we had some small concessions to Blood Moon, but the idea was, like, you can use Flage, dress on Flage there.
Yeah, I mean, I had Force of Negation, I had Celestial Purge, so it was definitely, I killed a lot of Blood Moon, except that Benton just had a million Blood Moon. At the end,
you wanna like this, Mengu, because because you play old school also sometimes, what's the best answer for the deck to Blood Moon, right? It's the Tome.
Red threats?
No,
red threats?
it's Jamming without Tome, so you draw enough cards, right? That's the best answer to Blood Moon. The Blood Moon, you put the Tome, you draw cards to win the game. So I felt here, they play Blood Moon, I play Ring, and I do the same. That's the idea behind Ring being the answer to Blood Moon.
It's hard because your whole deck is so many double color cards.
Oh, but they pitch. They pitch. You have the range, you pitch. It doesn't matter. You can pitch them all. Yeah. So you can also go for the classic dress down subtlety.
Anyway, I think the Boros Energy build of Benton was, was pretty good for the tournament. He found it at the kind of like the last day, and I think he was the only one playing it. But I think it was a good build. Obviously respecting Nadu a lot with the harsh mentors.
I don't know. I feel like Harsh Mentor could, like, if I had played Boros Energy, Harsh Mentor could easily be a main deck card. Like, it just goes well with the deck. Nadu is, like, the only good deck in the format, and, like, even against decks with Ring or whatever, I mean, the Mentor is not that bad of a card, compared to whatever you will cut for it, like an Amulet, which is not a big deal anyway.
Okay, yeah. Another great... Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I thought that was the biggest surprise for us, right? Like, we thought there was going to be way more. Like, some of us thought that Boros would be in, like, the top 3 decks played, and the metagame breakdown was happy for us. Like, we were like, oh, this is good for us. But the biggest surprise, we were just like, oh, not that many people are actually playing Boros. So we actually did think it was going to be a big deal. Like, the deck is fundamentally just good, right? Like, maybe not compared to Nadu, but as a deck, it was impressive to us. I don't know why it wasn't as popular as we thought it was going to be, but I remember that being the only surprise. Everything else was kind of what we expected.
Well, because it looks like a shitty white-red creature deck in Modern. That's why I think, like, if you don't try it, until you try it, it looks like, it's playing a Pioneer deck or something. That's
tragedy. Anyway,
And
go on.
there are two more decks I want to ask you about. So the first one is probably the second best deck of the weekend. And if you play Magic Online now at Last Chances, it kind of wins it all. It's Esper. This is a deck that Matt Sperling went 10-0 with, and then on Sunday in the PTQ, two people won the invite with, one of them being Kai Bude, and the other one being Egdar, who is the player who kind of put the deck on the map for Team CFB. And yeah, this deck is just, when I play Magic Online, I play against this deck the most right now. Psychic Frog works very well with Chorus Vengeance and Priest of the Fell Rights. And yeah, this deck has always been a very good deck in Modern, and whenever the format gets very combo, this deck does well. And right now, I would say that the format is very combo. So, did you guys, what was your experience with Esper?
Well, at some point, I think Slags was like, "Well, this deck is nice, so we should try it." He liked it a bit. Did I say it well? Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually played with it. I think it was you. I don't know who I played against or which deck. It was you. I don't remember what I played against, but it was like, nah, this is just like, our build was a bit different. It was like more stockish or whatever, but like, I felt this deck was not good enough against Nadu from my perspective. I could like sometimes I went off with Atraxa and will still lose to Nadu the following turn. This happened more than once and twice, like, because I will just go Atraxa, I don't find Solitude, and just greet them, whatever, and they will have the classic 10 outs or 11 outs to kill me, which was, it was a constant, like, this is a something very important over the last half in the testing, when I was playing Grief decks or whatever, like, I will often leave Nadu without hand and with a Shuka there, and I'll go like, alright, if you draw Nadu, Court, or Pact, you win the game, otherwise you lose. And that's like, every time it's like a 20%. 25% or whatever. Like I will just win the game, but winning the game will mean they have a 20 or 25% to actually steal the game back from me. That's a lot. You know, this is probably the single reason why Nadu is that good as a deck, right? Because it often gets this one draw step to actually have this 20% equity to win the game, which is completely obscene compared to like what other decks do when they're like pretty much dead, right? And this deck also fell from that. Like I was just like, yeah, I mean, I just comboed you, Atraxa, drew 10 cards or whatever. You have no hand, but I'm still dying. And that's, you know, that was not exactly the case post Cyber with Worthless Guess and such. But obviously, they will also have access to cards like Soga, Lantern post Cyber, and then my life will be much harder because of that. I just ultimately didn't feel it was good enough against Nadu, but definitely, I mean, they did it well in the weekend. So this deck looks a bit better than what I had, but I don't love it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem that we've had with the Glorious deck historically is that the deck is built like it is trying to have a backup fair plan as well as its combo plan, but the fair plan is just not very compelling, I think. Like, it's very reliant on ephemerate, and even then, like, a lot of these, like, your random creatures don't actually finish the game very well a lot of the time. And we felt that maybe Psychic Frog was what might fix that. Like, Psychic Frog is a very good bridge between that unfair plan and the fair plan, because it, like, you know, your creatures have some sort of value together, right? Like, if you just have, like, if you only ever put, like, a 3/2 menace into play, it's very hard to win the game with just that. But if you have, you know, a Grief and then a Psychic Frog, maybe you can actually win the game. But then the Psychic Frog also helps you kill people with the unfair plan, not only because it's a discard outlet, but because, for example, it can mean that Gristlebrand actually kills your opponent and doesn't give them that draw step to kill you, which both Nadu and Storm could, for example. So we thought maybe the Frog was going to save the deck, but it didn't feel like quite enough. Yeah, like, part of it was that it didn't feel good enough against Nadu, but I don't know, I kind of felt the same as Javier. It didn't feel good enough to us overall. Maybe this is a little better, but we wouldn't expect it to be dramatically different from how we felt about it during testing. It's probably, I mean, it's a fine deck, but I think it does have some structural issues there.
Yeah, one card we kind of found late in testing, which also applies to this deck as well as the Necro Dominance decks, was the Emperor of Bones. So that's like the Modern Horizons rare that you exile a card from the opposing graveyard or like from any graveyard any turn, and then you can adapt two counters on it. Whenever a counter is put onto it, you you put that creature into play with a finality counter, and then you get rid of it at end of turn. And so essentially, like, this is both for the Necro Dominance decks, it's like a really good answer to Flage. At any point, you can just adapt this, and then you get a free Lightning Helix. But also, it works very well with your Grief. That's a way to, like, grief them in the draw step or whatnot. Or, like, get an extra Solitude. And so, like, it works very well in these pitch decks. But it's a way to get your Atraxa into play. And obviously works well with Ephemerate. Like, if you get back Atraxa and then you Ephemerate it, it's going to just stay in play, right? If I understand correctly. Yeah. And so this was... And, like, compared to, like, Priest of the Fell Rites, which does something very similar, a little bit faster because it only costs 2 mana, but you are required to untap with it. And then also pay the 3 life. The Emperor of Bones is like a card you can just top deck and then immediately have it work. And so one of the issues with the Goryo's deck is that it will so frequently be able to interact with what the opponent is doing, like do the Grief Ephemerate thing, like have removal spells, do Solitude, whatever, like trade cards to the opponent. And then you set up your tracks in the graveyard, like you do everything you can, and then you just go in the waiting room for a Goryo's. Both players are in top deck mode, and you just like need to top deck well. And the deck doesn't actually top deck that well. It doesn't have like these dig spells that like dig super deep into the deck, or like give it card advantage that like means that it isn't just in these spots where it needs to top deck a specific card to win the game, otherwise it doesn't really get anywhere. And so adding more cards that are like Goryo's to the deck, I think could help it. But it's kind of an interesting balance though. And the like Psychic Frog like might also help in this direction. But ultimately I think we decided that it was like pretty late in the process that we like couldn't quite figure out the answers to this. But I think there's a little bit of regret that we didn't try to work on this earlier, because it's I think there's definitely a lot of potential in this deck. But
that was actually kind of huge. That was something that got us to actually try it, even though it was late, right? Like, we were like, oh, maybe this thing makes it possible. I actually completely forgot that wasn't in the stock list. So it's a good thing Simon remembered.
Yeah, that was the last thing we tried. Last session with Goryo's was actually try this card. Yeah. It was actually decent. Like, I thought it was good. Yeah. It was good, but not good enough to solve the issues with the deck.
Yeah.
The biggest issue was being worse than Nadu and trying to do the same in a way, right? Like, we're trying to be a combo deck, and, Nadu was better.
Yeah, so I think, Javier, you said something very important about the Grief versus Nadu, which is you just Thoughtseize or Grief them. Their hand is literally, they multiply, they have Urza Saga, 4 lands, and you die on turn 3. And that was definitely...
That's the Nadu experience.
Yeah. All right. And the last deck I want to ask...
Or you just Saga for that matter. Like, it's
also that.
Yeah, like, you can't overlook that. That's like, Saga is incredible against Grief Scam.
The last deck that I'm sure you tested, Javier, is of course Ugin's Labyrinth and every Tron version that you can build, whether it's Red Green Eldrazi Breach, whether it's Green Tron, Prison Tron. What was your testing with Ugin's Labyrinth?
Well, it was Green Tron, Mono Blue Tron with Null Drifter also, and a Blue Splash and Colorless Tron. So they were all equally good because it was all drawing the land. But ultimately, I ended thinking the colorless one was better. What I had in the end was actually not that much different to what you guys had. Like, obviously, Defying Command as one of the most important cards was rather easy. And I was surprised about how good the Devourer of Destiny was. It just actually makes Tron single-handedly a functional deck. Like, Tron used to be like, 10% of the time I'm only into 3 and die, whatever, That's not the case anymore. This card really does help. Like, if you keep Power Plant, Map, and this, you have like 12 outs in 5 cards to have a great hand in turn 2 or whatever. Like, that's just very good, right? The deck is very functional. And it was just a matter of like what to do with the rest. So the deck was powerful. It's very functional now. It has 2 answers. Two big issues. The biggest issue by a lot is, then again, surprise, it's not Nadu, and therefore it's much worse than Nadu. Like, Nadu's matchup was exactly not atrocious, but obviously that was only the case when Nadu was sort of ignoring you. I did try some builds with like Storm Remake instead of 3 Sears or whatever, and I think it was a beat ahead against Nadu. But of course, then you were having a deck with like Stonebrace main deck against, and then you just lose horribly to Boros or whatever. And the other issue with Tron, which is something Anthony mentioned before, is the One Ring is not good in the format as it is right now. And that was very important because Tron used to be a deck strongly based on the One Ring, like, banking on the artifact being like the best thing you could do in the format in terms of power. But that's not the case anymore, because if you play One Ring on 3 against Nadu, you just die, right? And if you play the 3 against the Storm, you also will die. And that's very important, because if you play Ring and you die, well, the Ring is not doing the thing it's supposed to be doing. Even against Jeskai or so, like if you play Ring and they play another Ring, you might actually lose if you play enough counter spells, or game 1 you might win because you might have enough threats, but post sideboard, the way this consigned to memory works, there's no way you beat a Jeskai Ring with your own Ring in Tron. So basically you're playing a Ring deck that doesn't defend itself from dying after the play Ring, and that's not very easy to fix. So I think for Tron to be good, you need to have a format where the Ring is good, or just build a different, like this, more like an Eldrazi Tron creature aggro approach or whatever. But like the way this is built, it's just like all these decks just try to play the Ring, right? The Tron decks trying to play turn 3 Karn on turn 3 Ring. Also, another thing, Ogil's Labyrinth is extremely powerful. It plays very well with Chalice, with Trinity Sphere and whatever, but it does not play as well as you might think with Karn, because turn 3 Karn is not the same when you don't have turn 5 or 6 Tron. Sometimes before we did like Talisman into Karn, that was fine, but you were still like often getting Tron. But the thing is, the deck now is considerably worse at having Tron, but it's better at having turn 3 Karn. But if you look at this, like once you turn 3 Karn, if Karn cannot get like specifically hate piece like Karst Totem or whatever, there's not too much you can do with Karn anyway, and that's dangerous.
I remember the part where I didn't like to play Tron was I was getting turn 2 Karn sometimes as well, because you go Yugin's Labyrinth, Talisman, turn 2 Karn, and you're like, oh wow, I went turn 2 Karn, and then your opponent just goes turn 3 Nadu, pass, and you untap, and you have 5 mana, a Karn in play, and you still like, you don't have, there's no, even if you can craft any card in the world, you still don't have a way to, like, you go dumping Matrix, you go, like, I was kind of like struggling in that regard, how to actually beat Nadu with Tron. At the end, like, I remember testing Nadu versus Tron against Martos. We had like a very long session, and the player on the play won, like, I think we finished 6-4, and I only won once on the draw, so the player on the play always had the edge, but because he was playing Trinisphere, which is actually very important. Like, he was just sometimes on the play, like, mulliganing to turn 2 Trinisphere, and then you were like, even if, it's not that every time you just have natural Nadu, sometimes you have to go for Pact, sometimes you have to go for Chord, and Trinisphere was very annoying that. In fact, I'm pretty surprised to see that the winning Tron list right now on Magic Online don't play Trinisphere, and I was wondering, what do you think about that?
Well,
Would you play with Trinisphere?
I played a lot of against Tron with Nadu, and in my experience, the Trinisphere has like a very short window where it's going to be good. And also sometimes, like, they might just have like Urza's Saga into Nadu, and they don't actually like need much to be able to beat the Trinisphere. They can get their combo and play through it. And then, it's true, like, it's going to be a little bit hard. Like, they're not going to be able to, like, play any 1-drops while they combo. They're going to have to, like, play 3 mana for their Nantuko or their Quad for Nantuko. But it's not that hard for them to, like, get there, ish. And then, of course, they also have access to, like, most of the time, they will have access to Haywire Might. And that obviously depends a lot, like, whether your Nautilus had access to that card or not. But the ability to get rid of the Trinisphere at some point mid-combo was pretty important. We actually even considered playing Trinisphere in Nadu as a hate card for Storm. That's how we feel about how good Trinisphere is versus Nadu. But I can definitely see, if you play turn 2 on the play, it's going to slow the Nadu deck down, like, significantly.
Sometimes even going, like, you have to go Nantuko, and you don't have 3 mana to cast it. I felt like Trinisphere from the Tron side was slightly annoying. I mean, it's not as annoying as other decks, but I felt
honestly, the more important part was the Karn shunting off the Shuko, and you get into this like very odd game. Like, so what would often happen for us in the matchup is that I would like, get a Shuko off Saga, then play a Nadu and equip it, and that's like the only thing I could do because there's a Training Sphere or whatnot in play. So I just like draw 2 cards and pass the turn. And then like, or maybe I can get rid of the Training Sphere somehow, but I can't do anything more. I just have this Nadu equip the Shuko. Then they play Karn and plus it, and now it's like at 4/4 Nadu against the Karn. I can't equip Shuko anymore to anything, and I can't quite attack and kill the Karn. But I'm gonna like try and go off with like Sylvan Safekeeper or whatnot. Try and make sure to not get Shroud to the Nadu, so that I can eventually like find a Bristlet Bill or like bestow and two Tukos onto it, so like get it up to 6 power, attack and kill the Karn, and then continue to go off and actually have it work. There's like some of these very interesting games where like another thing where like I use Bristlet Bill to load up counters on a Haywire Might, so that even though he had a follow-up All His Dust, it didn't actually do anything because I would just have this huge Haywire Might and be able to win anyway.
Yeah,
I think that matchup changes a lot whether or not you have access to Haywire Might, and we ended up playing 2, so.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, the Trinity was just kind of awkward. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So like the Trinity Sphere was actually awkward in the deck because like this Tron deck can only play like so much interaction, like fundamentally, because you don't actually have a lot of card drawn. Like your deck does have sort of critical massing. It also doesn't quite mulligan as well as the old Tron decks, but like you have to think of this Tron deck as substantially different to the old Tron decks because of the way it works. Like it doesn't reach as large points of mana. It's better at reaching sort of bigger than normal. So like you can get to like 4 or 5 very well. You're less good at getting to 7, obviously. But you also have to do it with like more cards because like for example, Urga's Labyrinth is it's a cardboard intensive card. And so playing like all these pieces like Trinisphere, Disruptor Flute, Dismember actually was relatively costly, I think. And part of that also was like the One Ring being worse, so like your card count did end up mattering. But it would be a little bit too easy to have like Trinisphere being a bad top deck in Tron is actually like very costly, I think. Like more so for this version of Tron than for previous Tron decks. I think if you are trying to work on Tron decks going forward, you have to be really mindful of the fact that these Tron decks shouldn't look like the green Tron decks that existed before. If you're building the green Tron decks, then sure, you can use the old ones as a reference. But I think that's something that's super important, I think. For example, like cards like Kozilek's Command went a long way because it doubles as interaction and like still plays towards your main game plan. All of the cards like Dismember and Disrupt the Flint and Trinisphere and Chalice that you can try to main deck, even cards like Thornot Seer that don't do this, are like very, very costly. And the more you put in your deck, the less of a functional deck you have. So that's I think that's really important to note. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask again, what was your like opinion on Tron? Like, do you think that Tron is better suited to play Trinisphere or just? I mean, you mentioned it, right? Thornot Seer. Like, you have so many options to build. Like the one that my team has decided to play was very high on answers. So you have the 2 flutes, the 4 Trinisphere, the 2 Dismember. I guess I say answer, I mean like non-threats. And,
yeah, I think you can't afford this many.
But then you have the other version, the one that, for example, won Yesterday Challenge and also 5-0 the Last Chance, who has a Sowa Miko Spawn, which, it's a great card, but it's green, so you actually need to draw a green source, and it's not that easy. So I feel like, similarly to Necro, Tron has so many cards available to it, and it's not that easy to build, and I don't think people have found the consensus deck list yet.
Well, the thing is, I mean, disclaimer, we did go a bit deep on Tron, but not as much as the other times. So, but like, the issue is, as Anthony said, the cost of playing these cards is massive. And intuitively, but they're also good enough, right? So intuitively, this means they probably should be played in small numbers. I think it's quite unlikely that the best version of Tron runs for Mika Spawn or for 3 Spheres, just based on how they impact the physics of the deck. That said, though, like if you spec enough decks like Storm, you might play those, but that's a different thing, and that's definitely not the world we're living in. You could have that approach with Stormbrain, but then again, you will lose games to Bristleville or whatever. Like, I simply think Tron has like structural issues the same way Necro does, but Tron is by itself too inflexible to overcome these issues. So I think for Tron to be good enough in the format, it has to be able to play more of its thing. Like, if you need to have enough answers in Tron to play Tron, which is the case now with Nadu, the best thing I can offer is, like, don't play Tron. Like, just wait until you can play only 6 removals, and then you can play Tron, and Tron will be great. If you have to play 14 removals, play a deck that can afford to play 14 removals, like Necro or Jeskai, not Tron. That's mostly the conclusion I got with Tron, even though, like, I like the deck a lot. I think it's definitely powerful, but I just think, like, the whole core of the deck cannot afford, like, the physics of Tron makes it so, like, if you play enough answers, your top deck will become worse, and that's considered of the old Tron which was specifically built to actually just put a lot of good top decks so you could win the top deck war. Like, I rapidly identified, like, having a lot of Eldrasis was a way to fix this. I was playing with 4 Ulamogs, for example. Like, if you play enough Eldrasis, presumably you can make up the fact that you don't have enough. But the issue, though, again, is that Eldrasis are not good enough against Nadu. So once Nadu is banned, because it could be banned, and then if the metagame plays in a way where we can play some Eldrasis that are good enough to win games, then maybe Tron is good enough. But the way I see now, I don't know if the answer is to play 4 Trin Spheres 3 or 2, but the answer is don't play Trin Sphere because don't play Tron. As right now, that would be my pessimistic impression.
Okay.
Clarify, when Javier says Eldrazi's, he means, like, it's a big. We're not talking like Thought-Knoxia, Reality Smash.
No.
Like,
Yeah.
When Javier says
Ulamog
Eldrazi,
plus.
he means Ulamog, actual 10-mana Ulamog. Like, we even started, like, looking into the other 10-mana Eldrazi. You know, like, we were like, maybe we can play 5 Ulamogs, you know? Like, that's it.
15 mana Emrakul. I actually tried the 15 mana Emrakul as well.
We didn't, like, try that much with Emrakul, I don't think, right? But that's...
A little.
That was in the World Council version of the Tron deck, and I think it's actually kind of interesting because against, like, instead of the 12 mana Emrakul, the new one, which can be good against Nadu, especially if you can do it instant speed, but it kind of requires some setup cost. The other one, you can just play that and then go off with the Nadu deck and just have them kill themselves.
Yes,
I think it's like
yeah.
That's like a pretty big incentive.
No, it's good. The issue is you still don't get to that stage of the game often. Like that was the issue. Like, we tried this. We tried Kozilek, also 15 mana Emrakul. I think we used all of them, and they were sometimes good, but they killing you to 3 with Nadu every time. So
yeah, and you have to start playing cards like main deck Flute, main deck Dismember, so your deck becomes worse in the field. But, like, of course, you mentioned it. So what do you think? Again, this Saturday I have this post Nadu Modern tournament. Easy question here to all the 3 of you. In order to end this episode, what would you play, and why? So let's go in order. Anthony, you're the first in this camera order that I have here. What would you play and why this Saturday if you had to play the No Nadu Modern tournament?
It's tough. Maybe I'd play a Necro deck, but I'm not really sure. Like, maybe Necro or Boros Energy, I suppose. Something that I felt wasn't particularly predicated on what the other... I mean, it's just too unpredictable what the field will do, right? In the wake of a Nadu ban, so I would just play something I think generically had a high power level and felt Necro was that deck. Maybe I would play Boros because that was a deck that felt like it was a little bit shut out by Nadu, but I don't think any other deck felt very clearly like that. So yeah, that's my guess for now. Not very sure about it.
Boros. All right.
Necro, but yeah.
Simon.
I would definitely play Boros Energy, or maybe Madu, like inspired by Ken Yugo Heroes list. And I think I would try and be ready for Tron. That would scare me.
So Ken Yugo Hero played Mardu. It was basically Boros splashing black for Chthonian Nightmare and Thoughtseize.
Yeah, like essentially he removed Lightning Bolt for Thoughtseize, and he removed the Amulet for Orcish Bowmaster and Chthonian Nightmares. And, like, otherwise his list is the same. And actually it has some really nice synergies. For instance, Orcish Bowmaster is a way to flip your Ajani, because you ping the cat. And then also, while at the same time providing 2 bodies. One of the issues if you try and use your removal spell to flip Ajani is that then you're low on creatures. But and then obviously Nightmares together with Ajani goes completely insane. Like, you just like lava axe the opponent like multiple times a turn. It's very.
What do you think about some versions lately that are playing the Ocelot Pride over Ragavan?
Yeah, so that's actually like kind of interesting. Like, right now there's also the historic qualifier weekend on Arena this weekend, where basically this entire deck is legal except for Ragavan. and lightning bolt, and so you basically like and so you're basically forced to like play the Pride instead of Ragavan, and then people really get to see like how good that is in historic. And I think it's like probably interesting here as well. It's very good with Fable. Like if you copy Ocelot Pride, it just goes completely nuts because then it starts making token copies of itself every end step. And I guess the biggest issue with it is that it doesn't like it like takes a little while to get going, and it's not as scary or immediate. And you kind of need to like combine it with other things like Goblin Bombardment or something to like really like pay off for having a bunch of tokens. But it's interesting.
All right, now to you, Javier. I really hope you answer a thing that I think. But what do you answer? What would you play?
I will play Storm.
No.
Yes,
Okay.
I will play Storm. I think Storm is like to be forgotten for this weekend. The hate is gonna be down, and Storm is it is a good deck if it's not hated out. It does kill fast. It's resilient to sort of normal interaction that's not like particularly targeted at it. I think you could easily take the tournament by Storm if you play it. So that's probably what I will play if I played the same tournament.
Take the tournament by Storm.
Or Javier,
Hey!
what if after this podcast end, I ask your opinion on blue-black control with Psychic Frog?
I will say it's worse than Jeskai, which is why I played Jeskai not blue black in the PT, because Fletch is better than the black cards. Which is something.
I want to play Psychic Frog.
Well, then you're free to be wrong. That's fine. I will
You
love
You
can
you
play
anyway.
Psychic Frog and Necro, Mango. That's another way to go.
Yeah.
Simon, you're lifting up your trophy. What's there?
No, it's
Speaking.
it's just good to remind people, sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What's your Player of the Year trophy? Do you have it nearby you?
Yeah, I actually have it. It's also behind
No,
me.
it's
But
okay.
it's like kind of like
It's
a
okay.
flag.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe this year you'll add the Kaibuda Player of the Year trophy. Of course, the
That would be
listeners.
cool, but definitely, like, I recently spoke to, like, coverage about this, and it's, like, I think, I try to, like, not think too much about the Play of the Year thing, because it's, like, very much out of my control. Obviously, I can, like, try and do as well as I can at the World Championships, but ultimately, I'm, like, not favored to make the top 8, but it's probably fairly likely that someone among the top 6 will make the top 8, and they will overtake me. So, that's basically where I'm at. I'm just gonna like try and run as hard as I can, and like if I make top 16, I'm gonna be good regardless. So yeah, that's basically what I think about that.
Simon saying he
We should-
doesn't like to make top 8.
Sounds like someone
I
else.
wish you
I
the
know.
best of luck, and we wish you the best of luck. And hopefully next time you are guest on this podcast, it would be after Worlds.
Yeah, well, we can congratulate Javier on winning the Kaibuda Player of the Year trophy.
Or we congratulate Simon on winning the Kaibuda Player of the Year trophy. So both work.
Maybe Anthony.
Maybe Anthony.
That seems less likely.
Anthony, I don't think Anthony can.
No, I don't think I
yeah,
can.
That's fair.
Anthony
Okay,
can
well,
win
he can maybe
also.
be a world champion.
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, if you top
Back
8,
to back.
you listen, Anthony. If you top 8 worlds, you will be considered going forward as a worlds specialist, because that's how results work.
That doesn't
Realize
make
that,
any
right?
sense.
But in general, it doesn't make sense, but that's how things work. You will probably just change the title to World Championship Specialist.
That will only be true because you keep saying it. That's literally the only reason that it would happen. It's entirely
Welcome to
your
the
No,
fault.
no,
welcome to the
someone also
internet.
keeps saying
Yeah,
So-
that's two. That's 2 of us already. And Mango also will start saying it. So it'll be 3 of us. So yeah, we get ready for that.
All right, and with that, we have the episode. Do you guys have anything else to add, or are you happy to end this?
Happy
Simon?
to go.
No, surely
Yeah.
Simon has some things.
Yeah, let's go, Simon.
Well, yeah, no. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Checklist Card, MR Checklist Card. You can find my coaching on metafight.gg / Simon Nielsen. And yeah, otherwise, just thank you for enjoying this game and having me on, guys. And it's always very cool to be on here, and I'm like so grateful for everything that's happening right now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure to have you.
It's good to have
Thank you so much for accept this invite. I also want to thank Mauro and Patrick for subscribing to the patreon.com/Karnies. And that's it. Thank you all, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you. Thank you for listening.
Cheers.
See you, Simon. Cheers.